It's hard to think of a biblical book that is more affected by one word than the book of Ecclesiastes is affected by the word Hevel. Ecclesiastes, in Hebrew Kohelet, is only 12 chapters long, and the word appears 38 times. At the beginning of the book we are told, Hevel Havalim, Amar Kohelet, Hevel Havalim, Hakol Hevel. Hevel of Hevels, Kohelet said, Hevel of Hevels, everything is Hevel. And at the end of the book we are told, Hevel Havalim, Amar HaKohelet, Hakol Hevel. Hevel of Hevels, the Kohelet said, everything is Hevel. In between these bookends, Kohelet applies the word Hevel to work, pleasure, wisdom, wealth, and much more. The way one defines Hevel determines how much of a pessimist and a radical Kohelet really is. There's a big difference between saying everything is meaningless and saying that everything is difficult to understand. So let's explore 5 popular translations of the word Hevel, beginning with the literal translation. In Aramaic, a Semitic language closely related to Hebrew, the word Hevel means breath, breeze, or vapor. My favorite example comes from the Babylonian Talmud, where we are told that the world only exists because of the breath, the Hevel, of the children, meaning that the breath of the children reciting Torah is upholding the world. This meaning of breath, breeze, or vapor is best seen in Isaiah 57:13, which talks about idols. The wind, ruach, will lift them up. A breeze, hevel, will take them away. Here, hevel, breeze, is parallel to ruach, wind. Some even suggest that the word hevel is an onomatopoeia, because a big wind or a big exhale kind of sounds like havum, or hevel. Some commentators, such as A.H. McNeil, have presented Kohelet in this literal fashion, with a translation of chapter 1, verse 2 as, Vapor of vapors, saith Kohelet. Vapor of vapors, all is a vapor, the vapor meaning the breath. The strength of this translation is that it is literally correct, but the weakness is that the metaphor is lost in translation. It would be like translating the English slang cool, as in those glasses are really cool, into another language as those glasses are at a low temperature. A better translation would be those glasses are hip, those glasses are stylish, which is the metaphoric meaning of cool. The second translation of Hevel is futile, not lasting, or fleeting, like a breath or a breeze that comes and goes. A good example comes from the Psalms, where we are told that man is like a breath, Hevel, his days like a passing shadow, Tzel. You might think you'll live forever, says Kohelet, but life goes by in an instant, like a breath of air. This approach is seen in the Jewish Publication Society's translation, which is, utter futility, said Kohelet. Utter futility, all is futile. And Thomas Kruger adds an alternative in his translation, fleetingness of fleetingnesses, said Kohelet. Fleetingness of fleetingnesses, everything is fleeting. The understanding of Hevel as fleeting and futile can be seen in the Aramaic Targum's introduction to Kohelet, which contains the following story about King Solomon, the builder of the first temple in Jerusalem. Solomon had a prophetic vision that one day the temple would be destroyed. Because it would not last forever, Solomon cried out, Hevel of Hevels, everything is Hevel. Nothing will last. Interestingly, this approach can also explain the name of Abel, the son of Adam, who was murdered by his brother Cain, as told by the book of Genesis. Abel in Hebrew is Hevel. Hevel's life was fleeting and short-lived, much like the breath he was named after. The third translation has a negative tone. Hevel is vanity, not in the sense of caring about self-appearance, but in the sense that everything is worthless. Everything is meaningless. We are merely flesh and bone waiting to die. An example of this meaning can be seen at the end of Proverbs, which describes a praiseworthy woman. Grace is a lie, sheker. Beauty is worthless, Hevel. A woman who fears the Lord, she is to be praised. Despite what you think, says Kohelet, beauty is worthless, Hevel, and this is parallel to sheker, a lie. St. Jerome took this approach when he translated chapter 1, verse 2 as Vanitas vanitatum dixit Ecclesiastes, vanitas vanitatum omnia vanitas. Vanity of vanities, said Ecclesiastes, vanity of vanities, and all is vanity. And as you can see in this chart, a number of popular translations do the same, including the influential King James Version. If one translates Hevel as vanity, Kohelet is more pessimistic, and life becomes much less meaningful. For example, according to St. Ambrose, the circus is vanity because it is totally without profit. Horse racing is vanity because it is counterfeit as regards salvation. The theater is vanity. Every game is vanity. All things are vanity, as Ecclesiastes said. All things that are in this world are vanity. The fourth translation of Hevel is beyond grasp, both physically and intellectually, or incomprehensible. Instead of there being no meaning, like the vanity translation, there is meaning, but you cannot understand it. This approach is taken by a former professor of mine and friend, Chun Leong Xiao, who writes, "What is Hevel cannot be grasped neither physically nor intellectually. It cannot be controlled." Kohelet 1:14 is a good example of this. "And I found that all is beyond grasp, Hevel, and pursuit of the wind, Re'ut Ruach." Just like one cannot catch the wind, one cannot grasp something that is Hevel. This approach is best seen in the translation of Craig G. Bartholomew, who translates, "Utterly enigmatic," says Kohelet, "utterly enigmatic. Everything is enigmatic." The fifth and final approach is the most pessimistic. Things are worse than meaningless. They are worse than worthless. They are absolutely absurd. This understanding can best be seen in chapter 8, verse 14. There's an absurdity, Hevel, that occurs in the world. Sometimes the righteous receive according to the conduct of the wicked, and sometimes the wicked receive according to the conduct of the righteous. I say this is also absurd, Hevel. In other words, sometimes life is completely unfair. This approach is taken by one of my favorite commentators, Michael V. Fox, who writes that Hevel means senseless or absurd, not in the sense of ludicrous, but in the sense of counter-rational, a violation of reason. Fox's translation of chapter 1, verse 2 is, "Utterly absurd," said Kohelet, "utterly absurd. Everything is absurd." So, having seen all the possible translations, what does Kohelet mean at the beginning and end of the book when he says, "Everything is Hevel of Hevels, all is Hevel"? If one translates Hevel as vapor, the book is vague. If one opts for fleeting and futile, then the book is about time passing by too quickly or things not lasting. If one chooses worthless or vanity, then things have no meaning at all. If one translates it as difficult to grasp or incomprehensible, then there is meaning, though it might not make sense. And finally, if Hevel is absurd, then things do make sense, just not how we would like them to, meaning life is absurd. With all this in mind, if I were to translate the book of Kohelet, I would choose beyond grasp. "Utterly beyond grasp," Kohelet said, "utterly beyond grasp. Everything is beyond grasp." It's a clunky, non-literal translation, but I just don't see Kohelet as pessimistically as others do. What do you think? Which approach works best for your understanding of Kohelet? If you find this type of study meaningful in a non-Hevel kind of way, you can take a class with me at biblicalculture.org, where I teach lots of different subjects about the Bible and its cultural world, including a class on Kohelet. You can also download recordings to study wherever and whenever you would like. And if you want to see more videos like this, consider donating $2 a month on our Patreon page. As Kohelet says in chapter 7, verse 27, "Achat la'achat limtso cheshbon," bit by bit, to reach a great sum.